Welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. It is a Thursday deep dive. Trying something a little different this week. If you were anticipating the show being available on YouTube, don't fear. Stand by. I'm working on that as we speak. So it should appear. If it doesn't, then, blame Google. You know what? I had it. Oh, my gosh, y'all. I had it so ready to go. And then I realized just now it's telling me I can't post it because my title's too long. I thought my title was very creative. And so I'm quite proud of it. And it's hurting me to see that it's not posting right now. Okay. I'm still working on that. So don't give up on YouTube. I'm just trying to do 15 things at once here. Maybe it posted. Go check over at youtube.com/at that's the little shift to at the Mic Show. It's a little confusing. At the Mic Show. I will say that a YouTube channel that you definitely need to subscribe to, bookmark, all the things, is the YouTube channel of my guest who's coming up here momentarily, Steve Friend. He hosts the American Radicals podcast. So go to youtube.com/@amradpod. Amradpod. If you're too confused because there's so many YouTube channels being thrown at you, just come back and pause this later. youtube.com/@amradpod. Because this gentleman has a lot of great information. He's an honorable man, and I'm honored to call him my friend. And I'm bringing him up here because he has a lot. We got so much we got to talk about with him. Before I go any further, though, let me say thank you to Hero Wes. Follow him on X at Second Floor Dallas. Gabby is on X at Jeffy Apologist. Wes gets us to all the sites like Spotify and Apple. And please, if you could rate and review, share. Don't forget, hey, it's the one-person project. Just share the show or the website. I don't care. Share it with anybody in your life. Your mailman might need something to listen to driving around. So anybody, the one-person project, just share the show if you would, please. And, of course, Gabby handles the Instagram page at the Mic Show. All right, that's enough babbling. Let me get my guest in here. This guy's awesome. His name is Steve Friend. You can follow him on X at Real Steve Friend. Do you, Steve, do you appreciate the top of the line graphics that we use here on At the Mic Show?
You're a Luddite like me, Keith.
Like
I mean, completely beholden to the assistance of others. I couldn't even put my own background up. My wife had to do it for me. So we're all in this together.
I love the studio redesign. It looks, I mean, it's much more mature than anything I've got going on back here. But I'll say that. I mean, that is sophisticated, man. I feel like I need a smoking jacket to go to your set.
I wanted to go with the tropical motif to remind myself that I live in the land of milk and honey, that is Florida, where woke and winter storms go to die. But then it got cold on me last week and I lost my voice.
Yeah, how you feeling? It's been rough for you, man. So are you feeling better?
I'm all good now. Yep. I get the RFK voice a couple times a year. I think one time when I was on with you on At the Mic, I was afflicted by it. And it's super frustrating in a post-coronavirus world where you have no other symptoms other than the vocal cords don't work and people think you have the bubonic plague and you're like, no, I just can't talk. But it makes it difficult to do the podcast.
Thank you for all of your fun experiments on humankind, Dr. Fauci, hand in hand with China. Sorry, that's a different show. We'll do that some other time. So I'm glad you're feeling better. I know you were in a terrible car wreck. You cannot catch a break, sir. And are you okay from that? Because I know you and your son were in a car, and that I've seen pictures. It's terrible.
Well, thank goodness for the safety of a non-American car, which I drive, a 2024 Toyota Camry. But my rear end got obliterated on the interstate by a distracted driver. My son was in the back seat and it held steady, so he was not harmed or any significantly. So we've got all limbs, all toes, and all fingers accounted for. And now it's just a question of are we in good hands or not with State Farm, which covers the other driver that doesn't like to pay out.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're okay. Because that trunk was just absolutely massacred. And look, I know there's going to be some people that are going to roll their eyes when I say this, and you might do that as well, but I'm going to say it. But it feels like, brother, you're almost like a modern day Job with some of the stuff that you have going.
I like Truman Show better. I sometimes feel like the rain is only falling on me, and then if I step out, it'll be revealed. But it definitely has that feel sometimes.
I swear. And it enrages me as an American, and I say this every time you're on, what you have been through. You blew the whistle on a federal government that was overstepping its constitutional authority. You did the right thing. You came out and you said, hey, this isn't right. And you have paid dearly for it. You've lost your career, and you have not been made whole, not even by any stretch of that definition. You have stuck your neck out for and gotten a retaliation from your government as a thanks. And this is on both sides. Both parties are guilty of malicious behavior toward you. And I hate it for you. I admire how you've been able to stay strong through all of this insanity in your world. And that's a mild word there. It has been horrible for you and your family, I'm sure. And can you give us an update? Because I'm trying to figure out where you want to jump in on this story, but we had an update a couple of months ago. If people missed out on that, let's go back. Let's do this. Let's go back to last summer. There was word of reinstatement. That wasn't the truth. The government continued to drag their feet. I'm talking about this administration. And then finally, something started to happen toward the end of the year. Can you just pick it up briefly there? I want to catch everybody up. And then we have just a crap load to talk about over here. So what happened a couple of months ago, man?
So early December of last year, far beyond any sort of material breach limit that you would have had for the agreement from the DOJ, which was 30 days in August. So we were multiple months after that. I received word on a Sunday night that I had to return to work the following Monday. I went to work for a couple of days with no gun or badge. Or actually, no, they gave me a badge, but no gun. And then they said that I didn't have a security clearance, so I had to be babysat and escorted around the building at all times. And then wound up being told, hey, why don't you just take some vacation time? So I took a couple of days off, and then was called on a Friday evening and said, you got to come in because we have some very, very uber important documents for you to sign. And I was not available. So I said, okay, come in on Monday. And then I got a text message from the New York Post that said, you're getting fired. Do you have a comment? Because the FBI leaked that improperly, I think violated some employment laws. And then they scrambled, and at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday said, we need you to come in from out of town, drive across the state to come in and meet with us for very important paperwork, which I knew was code to be fired. And I got an autograph from Kash Patel himself, firing me 6 days after they brought me back for things that he said I said while I was not in the employ of the FBI.
I mean, you couldn't get them to pay attention to you for year after year after year. And then, and the restraint you showed during that time was so, I would not have been nearly, I wouldn't have been half the man that you were during that time. And then for you to just, I don't want to get, I just don't, we've talked about this. We've covered this. I am just so sorry that you have gone through this, continue to go through this. And I hope that you have legal options. I don't know how much of this you want to continue to talk about, because I don't want to be responsible for any kind of blowback that you might face. I would just say that I hope that someday, somehow, some way, this government does you right, although you and I both know this government sucks, and that's not happening. Anyway, no, I'm so sorry, man. Hang in there. That's all I can say. And that does nothing. That does nothing. That's just from one friend to another. Cheers. I don't know, man. I'm sorry. What's do you want to tell us what's next on this, or do you want to just let it lie and move on to the stuff?
I mean, I'm working through things with an attorney right now.
Okay.
Merit Service Protections Board stuff. You know, the administrative rigmarole that they're going to have the government assess whether the government did anything wrong, and then ultimately determined the government didn't do anything wrong. So
Sure.
maybe we'll wind up in federal court, but then I guess at best you'll get a court ruling that says the FBI has to do something, which technically I kind of have already, which is the settlement agreement. So how do you enforce it? I just kind of really like being the mosquito around Kash Patel at this point, just bothering him because he's not really good at swatting mosquitoes. He just punches himself in the face and get rid of me.
I will say that one thing that has proven true, whether it's the Biden administration in the past, in the last few years, or the Trump administration today, you, sir, have had to deal with people in authority that are much smaller men than you. And I am so sorry. Okay. And I'm talking about at the Hoover building there and the people that you report to. And it's vomitous. I was listening to your awesome podcast, available not only on youtube.com/@amradpod, but it's on Spotify and everywhere else. And I was listening, and you used a word, because I do want to come back. We have so much to talk about with Kash Patel, and we will get into that. But I want to visit, and it was it actually turned out to be the inspiration for today's show title that I was so proud of, like I said, and it got me in trouble because it was too long for YouTube. And what was it? It was malicious compliance is the phrase that you used on your show. And I stole that for this show today. And I called today's show Malicious Compliance and Other Tales of Government Fails. I'm sorry. I'm just going to toot my horn there because I thought that was a fun title there. But you use that phrase on your show for malicious compliance. Explain what you were talking about and what that means, because I found that just fascinating and so accurate. Malicious compliance.
Well, there's the letter of the law, and then there's the spirit of the law. That's sort of the frame you have to look at it through. And we saw that with the Epstein file dump that came out, where the Epstein Transparency Act was passed through both houses of Congress almost unanimously, signed immediately, and then they were in breach. They hadn't turned over anything, and finally they threw their hands up in the air and just dumped allegedly all of the documents. They did, but let's just for the purpose today.
I'm so glad you said that, because it's technically not compliance, but just for the sake of this conversation, let's say it was. Yeah.
Let's just say it was. They did the document dump like it was a giant pallet of documents. So they were in compliance with the law, but did so maliciously, because the spirit of the law was, you're going to reveal these documents to us. You're going to lay it out in a very linear fashion, in a way that's digestible, in a way that the American people can look at it and understand what was going on there, as opposed to just a huge trove of documents that is going to include things in it that are not relevant to the investigation, or were not germane, or were crazy people who were calling into the FBI, and because they called a bit about Epstein, they were included. So it was done in compliance, but in a malicious way, in the hopes that the American people would not be able to follow through, or they would grab onto something that wasn't true. And therefore, when they ran with it, they said, oh, see, it's a conspiracy theory. You don't know what you're talking about. It's very much like a civil lawsuit where there's a subpoena for documents, and you want 3 particular documents, and then the opposition drops 3 million documents on you and says, oh, you go ahead and follow through and find it. It's in there. Or take it out of a lawsuit context. It would be like when the speed limits were set on the interstate, and the truckers were saying, like, hey, this is going to really hurt our ability to travel because it's going to slow us down. So we're just going to line up a bunch of semi trucks in every single lane and drive exactly at the speed limit to create a giant backlog to make the point. We're complying. You can't go after us. We're not obstructing traffic. We're driving the speed limit. And now you've made the point.
Yeah, that's well said and explains it perfectly. And what's fascinating is to see these stories just in drips and drabs just coming out, and you're like, that's interesting. And it's fine. It's somebody has located story A, story B, story C, and it's taken them forever because they're having to go through all of these documents. And so it's brand new breaking news. It's not something that we all collectively knew 3 weeks ago. It was released 3 weeks ago or what have you, but it's just now being noticed. And you laid it out perfectly. There was no for lack of a better way to describe this, there was no perfectly organized binder with dividers and sections that we could just flip to. It was not laid out like that at all. And here we are. Okay, so malicious compliance. That's the phrase that pays. So I just found that very interesting. A great description for the Epstein files and how those were released by the Department of Justice. But something else has been on your radar lately, and rightfully so, is the FBI director, the guy whose signature you have, as a matter of fact, as you mentioned there. And I want to let me first, before we go down this road of all the stuff with Kash Patel himself that we have to talk about, I want to put up this tweet that I saw making the rounds, because if people have been living under a rock, the FBI director, Kash Patel, he made an appearance, and he was in the locker room after Team USA won the gold medal in Italy. And so on Sunday morning during the celebration, who appeared on the live stream there, one of the players, it was Kash Patel himself in the locker room with the beer and just, the champagne and all sorts of stuff. And in hindsight, I guess it shouldn't have been a shock, because in July of 2025, Kash Patel himself tweeted out, NHL agreed to let the boys play in the next Olympics this coming winter. First time in over a decade. Team USA, I'll see you there. Now, Kash Patel grew up playing hockey. Kash Patel, big fan, and as every American should be, of our Team USA. And he has every right to go and travel there. And if he wants to use his credentials to get to the locker room, so be it. Whatever. I mean, that, I guess, as a private citizen, if he wants to do that, and then as a public official, can get past security, whatever. I think most Americans are kind of like that as far as this story goes. Try not to make it into an issue beyond that, because he appeared there and there he was. Okay. But as I saw that, and I don't even want to use the word off-putting, while it was kind of like I'd probably do the same thing, whatever. If the Falcons ever won the Super Bowl and I was the FBI director, I might do that. I could see maybe. But the problem I had, or the question I had, which has now become a problem for me, the question I had immediately was, who paid for that trip? Was this on Kash's dime? And he said, hey, look, I'm the FBI director. I love these guys. I'm a big fan. Go in there, get out, Do we know definitively how that trip was funded to get the director of the FBI into the locker room with Team USA, Steve?
Yeah, you paid for it as a taxpayer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Of course I did. I mean, of course I did. Okay, so I paid for it. We all paid for this.
I don't even know if he had a ticket to the game, to be honest. I think he might have just showed up there and did the whole dignitary thing. And look, they spun and spun to make this look like it was a legitimate trip.
That's the
thing.
On
top of that, to make it look like it was a legitimate business trip, because they had arranged for all these different nonsensical meetings. The big thing they're hanging their hat on is that he met with some counterpart in Italy to sign an agreement where an intent to talk about cybersecurity in the future. If you're talking about cybersecurity, you can do that on a Zoom call. It is cyber, after all.
Wait, hold on a second. All the time. I'm sorry. I got to revisit this. They signed an agreement.
A letter of intent. It wasn't even a treaty.
So they're going to talk about cybersecurity in the future. Is that right?
That's right. And then his schedule was revealed, and it basically was all personal time and cultural activities and going to the Olympics. And then they tried to spin it and say that, well, he was there to learn about security. Well, he would have done that well in advance of the Olympics. He wouldn't have showed up for the last couple of days. And then they try to spin it and say, well, he was actually there doing security, even though he doesn't have a gun and doesn't actually do security. And again, it was the last few days of the Olympics. Was the opening ceremony not a potential threat to the American athletes? So that doesn't hold water.
Right.
So they continued to spin and make it look like it was a business trip and it was legit. And then I even saw the whole Q thing where, he was actually there under the cover of the Olympics and he was going to find out what happened in the 2020 election. Okay. If you think the 2020 election rolls through Italy,
okay,
then I got a bridge to sell you in New York. And on top of that, you think the FBI director is actually doing investigations into election fraud and not somebody who's one of his subordinates who are the actual investigators. So people are just grabbing onto whatever they can to justify it and say like, well, he just loves America. Look, he's a pig. He's not even good at being abusive of his position. Look, if you want to be smart about abusing your position, you do what you were sort of talking about there. You show up in a suit, and then you buy a ticket. You make it. You say, hey, look, I'm going to pay the freight on personal travel, which I can fly privately on the jet the FBI gives me. I have to pay the round trip of a commercial airline ticket. That's what I have to pay. He didn't do that. He had the American taxpayers pay for the entire thing. He was on per diem the entire time he was there. You show up in a suit, take in the game, and leave. And if you were that big of a jock sniffer that you want to go into a locker room and see a bunch of 20 and 30-year-old naked men and party with them on a celebration for a win that you weren't part of, then you even be smart and say, hey, I'm here as a representative of the United States government. I've got the president on speakerphone, and he would like to wish you congratulations. And he wasn't even smart enough to do that.
Well, hold on. Yeah, right. Okay. So I looked up the salary of the FBI director. It's somewhere between 175 and 200,000. So I think you could afford a trip to the Olympics if you so chose. But that speakerphone thing, I want to visit that just momentarily, and I didn't queue it up or anything like that. But I wrote down the quote from the president. Because they were talking about getting the guys to the State of the Union speech on Tuesday night, which did materialize. And in that speakerphone conversation in the locker room with Donald Trump on the phone, as Cash was saying, hey, I'll get this organized, whatever. I'll get this, whatever. And the president said, quote, if Cash is doing it, I'm happy. If Cash is doing it, I'm happy. Okay. All right. I'm probably reading too much into this, but that was a signal to me that, and again, I'm probably the only one reading this deeply into this, and I may be way off base, but that made it sound like to me like, yeah, Trump's happy with Kash Patel. Look, if Cash has got it handled, I'm happy, whatever. That I know it's in good hands, blah, blah, blah. Again, I probably read too much into that, and I'm thinking, no, don't trust it, no. So anyway, that was a little nugget that I extracted from that speakerphone conversation in the locker room.
I think you're on firm ground. I think the president is divested entirely from the FBI. He can't possibly be paying attention to it and take away any conclusion other than Kash Patel is a government gangster himself and completely and wholly incapable of leading the agency into any sort of de-weaponized state. And he's accepting whole cloth things that are nonsensical that are being thrown out there because he's just not digging in the details or doing any sort of like critical thinking, which is what Kash Patel and others have been able to do to manipulate the man. And because he just wants to hear that things are great. And that's not true.
Do we know how Kash Patel got to Italy?
Yeah, on the FBI Gulfstream jet.
Oh, is that right? Oh, because I have a clip here. I don't know. Maybe it's useful for this conversation. Let's just see if you can find any place to use this information here. I think this is what do we got? I think this is December of 2023. I think, if I recall, he's sitting in Glenn Beck's office, and he had this to say about use of said jet.
And I'm not saying take all their funding. I'm not the defund everything guy.
Okay.
I'm just saying Chris Wray doesn't need a government-funded G5 jet to go to vacation. Maybe we ground that plane. $15,000 every time it takes off. Just a thought.
Minimum.
Wait, hold on. Whose jet is he talking about? Christopher Wray.
And I'm not saying take all their funding. I'm not the
Remind us who Christopher Wray is.
Former director of the FBI.
Okay, so I got you. All right.
defund everything guy.
He's not the defund everything guy.
I'm just saying Chris Wray doesn't need a government-funded G5.
All right, so the former FBI director, whose position this guy now holds, doesn't need a government funding jet
to go to vacation.
Okay. Yeah, but see, he was working in Italy. Don't forget that. He went there to sign that thing there.
And it's important to remember how there's a couple things about the abuse of the jet that are worth noting. Number one, Kash Patel has leaned on John Solomon to spin for him and do a breakdown of how much he travels. And the takeaway was that James Comey traveled like a couple % more than Kash Patel. And Christopher Wray actually traveled less than both of them. And that was the spin that was in their favor. The other thing is that Chris Wray was a pig because he made the jet fly from Manassas, where it's housed, about 12, 15 minutes to Reagan Airport to pick him up because he didn't want to sit in traffic. And every time it did that, it had to pay a landing fee at Reagan International Airport. Kash Patel said, I am done with this. We're not doing that anymore. I make it fly from Manassas to Joint Andrews Air Force Base. Similar distance of flight. It doesn't have to pay a landing fee like $2,500, but he doesn't want to sit in traffic either.
Hold on.
So he makes it fly to a U.S. military base instead to pick him up, as opposed to driving out to Manassas, which he could do comfortably because he's being driven by his protective detail in his brand new armored BMW that he ordered.
And I just a small bone of contention with you. You keep saying it has to pay the landing fee. Who's paying for that landing fee again?
Oh, you and me.
That's
sir.
okay. I just want to make sure I was clarified. All right, so that's fun. I love hypocrisy because it's awesome, especially when it's people that you were one of the strongest cheerleaders for. And boy, you sit back, and when story after story come out, it just feel more and more like a dope when stuff like this happens, and it's your side. But we seek the truth here. So okay, so that's fun. A lot of use of the private jet. Can you remind us, because I know that there's some information that you have that maybe people have forgotten. Was there a former FBI director that you've enlightened us with from, I don't know, maybe a few presidencies ago that had to resign over something like this? Or am I wrong?
William Sessions, the first FBI director ever fired in the history of the FBI, fired in 1993 during the Bill Clinton administration. They came in and delayed his firing because they didn't want to make the FBI a political agency. See if we can get some parallels here, because
what do we got?
Kash Patel came in, Christopher Wray leaves, he resigned. It wasn't a firing, but the role of the FBI director is a 10-year appointment, and it is now going to be a political appointment. It's not going to last for 10 years. But William Sessions, the allegations came out of an Office of Professional Responsibilities report. They interviewed over 100 employees of the FBI, and they found out that he did things like arrange for himself to be issued a firearm so that he could avoid certain taxes on his chauffeuring. Kash Patel has had guns issued to himself. He arranged for like $10,000 of security fences to be put around his property. Kash Patel has arranged for certain security protocols for himself and other things to be built within the FBI for himself, like a whiskey bar in his office and reupholstering the jet and building a podcast studio. Then William Sessions also got himself a favorable mortgage. The allegation was like a $375,000 mortgage, which he was responsible for paying off. Kash Patel's trip to Italy cost the American taxpayer $400,000. So apples to apples, I think it goes.
Wait a minute.
Kash Patel. And then we have the assignment of protective details to William Sessions' wife to go with her on her nail appointments or when she went grocery shopping. And we know that Kash Patel has assigned FBI SWAT teams to protect his girlfriend, or as I like to call her, the girl who's his friend, when she's gone to sing the national anthem at events like at an NRA convention.
God almighty. Yeah, that's good stuff right there. That's good stuff. But don't you dare point that out, because then you're a security threat if you.
That's worth also throwing in there. That was the last thing that came from Ben Williamson, who's the professional spin man for the FBI, Assistant Director of Public Affairs.
That's who I think I saw a Milan tweet.
He said that the news reporting on where Kash Patel was going to be was a security risk that they could potentially be charged with the crime. Well, newsflash, your boss posted on his own personal social media account that he was going to the Olympics last July. So perhaps you could assess whether or not he's got some operational security problems.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, is the thing that got a pilot fired, right, was because he took a social media picture. What was it, on the runway or something? When he flew, I don't remember all the details, but I remember that it was a big stink because the pilot took a selfie or something, or took a picture while they were traveling. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Well, if it's the FBI pilot, it was actually Chris Meyer,
who
was one of the agents involved with the Mar-a-Lago classified documents.
Okay, we're gonna
he was
get
flying around with Kash Patel.
Okay.
When they found that out, they fired him. And Kash Patel has been really terrible with pilots because he's abused his jet privileges so badly that there were incidents like when Charlie Kirk was assassinated or the Brown shooting happened, and they didn't have enough pilots who were fully rested to fly evidence response and shooting review teams out.
Okay, there are so many tentacles right now that are spread throughout this conversation. Let me just try to put a bow on some of these. I feel like, if I remember correctly, the Pennsylvania thing, and if I have this wrong, I apologize. I need a fact checker. I need Gabby or somebody to post on here when I get wrong, which is going to be plenty every show. But I feel like it was like an embarrassment that the guy posted a picture which gave away that Kash was where his girlfriend was singing. I don't know. I'm sorry if it was Pennsylvania.
No, Kash did that himself. He put his own picture on Instagram with themselves at the total nonstop action wrestling event at Penn State that she was singing the national anthem at.
Okay. I'm getting all my Kash scandals mixed up, I think, and that's the problem. And I do want to visit the Jets situation here, but okay. I think you mentioned Ben Williamson. I don't know if this is right either, but I swear, somebody had drafted at the FBI a tweet and had it ready to go for when the pushback on Kash appearing in the locker room in Milan, and it was that whole working trip, whatever thing. And so I wonder if it was that guy, but it was just maddening how they were ready. They knew the pushback was going to come. Oh yeah, well, he was doing this.
Yeah, he was going and shaking hands with a few people. And then when the schedule was released, I mean, you're talking about the majority of his time was personal time, cultural activities, private dinners, attending the Olympic hockey game, and then flying back home. So it was a personal trip, and nobody's begrudging an individual who is a representative in the government a personal trip. In fact, I mean, you want to do maximum latitude. I'm willing to even let him get away with doing like the frat boy SEC brewskis on everybody's celebration if he was actually doing a good job at the FBI. And he's clearly not. So he gets no grace.
Both of these stories that I'm holding in my hand, headlines are from 2 days ago. It's the same story, but different headlines. And then I'm going to just read them to you and let you take it from here. One headline says, new FBI whistleblower allegations say Kash Patel was, quote, has, quote, harmed actual investigations with jet use. You just started to allude to that. The other headline here reads, Kash Patel's use of jet delayed FBI team's mass shooting response, whistleblower tells top senator. Now, I have some quotes from the story that I can get to, but I'm just going to turn you loose on this. What is that all about?
Well, that is about Kash Patel abusing the jet to the point where the pilots have to have a mandatory rest period. It's like FAA law. You have to be able to ground for 8 hours or something, because if you don't, then you're going to be tired and we're going to have accidents in the sky. And that's why you go to fly out originally at 6 o'clock in the morning and you're like, why am I delayed? The weather's great. It's like, well, because the pilot probably got in at midnight last night. He has to, by law, rest until 8 o'clock or something.
It's like truckers I see parked on the side of the road.
Yes.
They're sleeping.
So they did not have available pilots to fly out to the Charlie Kirk shooting, and they didn't have enough pilots to fly up to the Brown shooting. They had to actually drive through a winter storm in order to get there the next day because he's so rampantly abusing his jet privileges.
So hold on. There is the shooting at Brown University in Rhode Island, right?
Yes.
And so that takes place. Agents have to drive to Brown University through a snowstorm. Because why exactly?
Because they couldn't fly. The plane was not available. There was not a pilot who was well rested for them to get it. It was actually for time management purposes, it was better for them to drive. They would get there sooner. Because
Kash was using that plane on a vacay in Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. He's been flying to Nashville to do booty calls with his girl who's his friend. He's been flying to big donors, private ranches in Texas to go do hunting trips. He's gone to Scotland, and now he's gone to the Olympics. And even when he does these fake business trips, he went to say that, I stopped fentanyl trafficking from China because I made them sign a letter. He was flying out to Asia, but then they couldn't land in China full time because they had communications intercepted. So they had to fly to a safer area to go drop him off and then pick him up. And I mean, He's not really a good steward of that. And look, even outside of just the salaciousness of him abusing the jet, can we focus on the whistleblower who came forward to Dick Durbin? So a whistleblower came forward in full knowledge that yours truly had his life completely destroyed, and others like me had our lives completely destroyed, and felt comfortable doing that. Why would that happen? Because it's Dick Durbin. Because Dick Durbin is of the left. Because their FBI right now is looking over the horizon at what the political prospects are and says, oh, this guy's going to be in charge very soon, and I will be protected. And also, the FBI is not going to go after me as a whistleblower because the FBI does not like Kash Patel. They're not going to run cover for Kash Patel like they did for Christopher Wray. And that's not because Kash Patel's done such an awesome job at fumigating the Hoover building over there. It's that he's an incompetent boob who embarrasses them. So they've been keeping up a journal of all the derogatory material. And that will all come out when the Democrats take back control of the House and the Senate, and they're starting to hold hearings. He'll be impeached. He'll be in handcuffs because that's actually what the communists do. They get elected to power to do something, not to be something, which apparently the Republicans, that's all that their function is at this point. Josh Hawley can get up there and have a viral moment and talk about things, but there's no arrests. There's no indictments.
Yeah, I mean, there's quotes in here. Let me just real quick shout out to Wes. This is, I'm sure, what you would like to see the Hoover building look like at this point. Spirit Halloween. They need to go out of business.
No, they didn't even close the Museum of the Deep State. I mean, we didn't even move out of Washington, D.C. We just moved down the street to the Reagan building.
It's so depressing. It's like you thought. I'm sorry. Let me speak for myself. I thought this is the guy I want. I mean, I wanted two confirmations above any of them. And it was Robert Kennedy to HHS 1, Kash Patel FBI 2. Shame on me. All I knew from Kash Patel was what I heard from podcasts and interviews. Thought this is the guy. This is the guy. Boy, I would have made the same mistake that President Trump did. Okay. I've got other things here. But before I get to them, man, we have so much talk. We always have so much to talk about. You know why we always have so much to talk about? Because there's so much shit happening all the time. And we're always having to hold these toddlers. We're having to hold them accountable. And nothing ever comes of it. And so it just keeps, it's like compounding interest, Steve. It just one thing piles on to another. And we're always having to go back over previous ground. So let me get to this stuff here. First, another story in the news today. Headline is at least 10 FBI staffers who worked on Mar-a-Lago documents case are fired. Oh, wow, that's good. We've got accountability. The FBI got rid of 10 staffers who were part of that terrible raid into the First Lady's garments. And what that's good news, right? That's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's good if you don't actually do a little bit of thinking and realize that Kash Patel's been there for over a year. Okay. So if this is actually a good faith effort in personnel to root out the corrupt parties, it took him over a year to look up who was part of that and flesh that out, as opposed to maybe it's just a snap thing to do. It's a break class in case of emergency type of move because I'm taking too much heat over my Olympics antics. So just give me 10. 10 is a good number, right? The top 10, the FBI 10 most wanted, the 10 commandments. That tweets really well. So we'll just pick 10 off of this list and then get rid of them. And then they'll sue and get their jobs back after, of course, I've been run out of there and probably been indicted for some of the things that I did. But at this point right now, it plays really well on social media, which is exactly where this is designed to go. And it wasn't 10 people who were involved with the classified documents case. You're talking about hundreds of people. So what happened to the others? Were they good or are they already eliminated? Why did you wait for these 10 or are more coming in the future? It's completely for optics, but that requires a little bit of extra thinking.
Yeah, but, well, we don't have time for that. We're too busy paying our taxes to go to fund private jet trips. So this reminds me, something that I continue to hear is that we're not really getting rid of too many people at the FBI, right? We're just kind of rearranging the deck chairs, from what I understand.
Well, I mean, other than myself, it looks like the Department of Justice. From what I understand, the Department of Justice was touting how they had removed like 140 people. That's the DOJ, which is the umbrella agency. A sub-agency of that is the FBI. So I don't think we're really slaying a lot of dragons who have worked within the Hoover building specifically, and even from headcount perspective, they bragged about how we're really reducing the footprint within Washington D.C. They didn't send people back to the field; they just stopped bringing them in to Washington D.C., which is on a rotation. Every 18 months, people would come in and then go back to the field. They just said, "All right, well, we'll cancel that program." It's always a manipulation with the numbers game. Kash Patel is one of the most nakedly obvious when it comes to numbers. And I'm a numbers guy, so it really is a bee in my bonnet. Every time he puts out numbers, I can read right through it and realize like that is completely garbage because I know how it works and I know what he's saying doesn't make sense. And it just takes a little bit of either inside knowledge or just the gumption to type in a fact into a search engine and realize, oh, okay, that's a lie. But that plays really well within 140 characters on Twitter.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's just I just sit here and I just stew and I'm just angry. Okay, so let me ask you this. Some of the things you've been talking about on your show, youtube.com, don't forget, it's at AMRAD Pod. See that? AMRAD Pod, American Radicals, which I continue to tell you because it's true. It is the coolest logo in podcasting. It is Wes, close your ears. It truly is. And in fact, no offense to your wife, but here's what you might just it's my decorating tips. As you can see, I'm an interior decorating pro back here. What would be kind of I think what's missing is over your right shoulder, up against the border there, between the lamp and the border, maybe a where's Gertrude? Come here, Gertrude. Hang on. Maybe a picture like this size. See, there's Gert, and then it's sitting there on the desk, and it's just your show logo sitting back there, huh? Because right, you like it.
I weighed a couple of things, and YouTube is pretty good. They put the logo in the corner. Unlike Rumble, because YouTube's a little bit superior of a platform. The other thing that I weighed doing was one of the reasons the reason I guess that Kash Patel fired me was because I made a comment on a podcast that if in fact he and Dan Bongino were putting an innocent person in prison so that they could impress the president that they deserve to go to prison, it was a callback to Commodus from the Gladiator movie. Where am I not merciful? I said, well, I'd be very merciful. I would put you in prison as opposed to, a death sentence, something to that. I wanted to put a picture of Commodus on the wall, but I thought it was too deep of a pull. Yeah. Then I read into Commodus a little bit more and it wouldn't have been really good.
Okay, well, but see, that's the thing though. It's like your one-liners are up there with Dennis Miller on Monday Night Football. You know what I'm saying? If you don't understand a Nisha reference while you're breaking down a cover 2, then probably not the host for you. See, in hindsight, I was a young adult when Dennis Miller had his run on Monday Night Football. And while I enjoyed him on Saturday Night Live, and I enjoyed him on Monday Night Football, now that I'm older, I think I would enjoy Dennis Miller even more today if he were doing Monday Night Football.
Dennis Miller in an era where they have end racism on the back of the end zone would be must-see TV.
Yes! I don't know how I showed up to work today and I thought I'm going to be a racist. And then I looked out on the sideline in the end zone and I thought, no, we're going to end it today. Anyway, I don't know. I could totally see it. Okay. Let's see here. What's this hiring strategy changing at the FBI? Yeah. What do we got going on with that, Steve?
Well, to become an FBI agent, they have a really long drawn out process. It takes some people, 6-8 months if they're really fast tracked. It takes most people about 2 years. It took me 4 years.
Okay.
The most cumbersome portion to that is called phase 2. Now, phase 1 is you take a written academic test, and right now, I mean, I did it when it was back in the old days when it was paper, but now it's computerized. You find out right away if you passed it. You got to have a certain prerequisite number of skills and work experience. You got to pass a fitness test. And those sorts of things are pretty straightforward. Phase 2 is one of the strangest portions of the process. You are flown or you have to travel to out of your area. You do a written portion where you are handed a fictional case and you have to break it down and assess it. And then you have to sit through an interview with 3 FBI agents where they ask you scripted questions that are extremely hard to answer. You have no advance notice of what the questions are going to cover. You just have to go in cold, and it will be questions like, tell us about a time where you were working in a group setting and everybody in the group disagreed with you, but you were able to convince everybody in the group to your way of thinking, and then it was a successful operation. I mean, just go, right? Hard. And it's an interagency rivalry joke in the FBI. I mean, in the FBI, you interact with another special agent, but from the DEA, and you'd be like, yeah, lucky for me, I passed phase 2 because I don't have to be in the DEA now, right? I mean, it's very hard, and it's really good at fleshing out some people that you don't want, people who can't cut it with the writing section. They can't think critically. They can't be good on their feet. And that now is going to be eliminated, not for people coming from the outside, like I was a police officer. I would still have to go through phase 2. But for people who have already been hired by the FBI and are working in a support capacity, like an intel analyst, like an administrative person, like a tech person, anybody who's with the FBI already will not have to undergo that, which means that they're going to allow the far left politically portion of the FBI to just tiptoe through that process. Or people who got hired by the FBI straight out of college, they were an intern, and now they're an operational support technician, basically like a secretary, and they have known nothing else other than the FBI for their entire professional lives, and they think that this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they're going to do whatever they're told. Or people who have been there for a really long time, and there could be compromising material on. I mean, we know about your extramarital activities here. We know that you messed up in the past here or there. Are you sure you want to throw the flag on us, or do you just want to follow orders? So it's going to make things far worse than it's ever been.
Everybody's compromised up there. Everybody. I'm convinced everybody is compromised up there. I was scrambling around. I was looking here yesterday on the, I guess we're going to call it the inaugural Wildcard Wednesday. I had a test, looked like an FAA air traffic control test that blew into my yard. And it was like a practice test or something, and everything had multiple choice and all the answers. And damn it, if I didn't throw that thing away, and I can't find it. Normally, I'll tell you what, Steve, normally I just drop my show prep on the floor, and it sits here for several weeks until I decide to get, no, I found it. This is it. Yes. Okay. So here, I mean, here's question 11. If you're ready. A taxiway blank is identified. I'm sorry. A taxiway blank is identified by a continuous yellow line. That is the A. You can just guess here. Let's see if you have what it takes to be an FAA, and then I'll get back on track. I have ADD, obviously. Is that a holding line, a parking area, a center line, or closed for repair? Just guess.
Center line.
All right. So you're 1 for 1. You know what? I tell you what, I'm going to play hiring agent for the federal government here. If you get the next 2 right, I'm going to send you to the tower over here at the local airport. Okay.
All right.
Let's see. Okay. Question 14. I have not looked at just a couple of these. Okay. Question 14. Taxiway edge lights are, okay. Taxiway edge lights are A, white, B, amber, C, blue, D, red.
Amber.
I'm sorry. You got that wrong.
Darn it. Dang it.
You just got to go study. No, it's blue. It's blue.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's got the line, the blue The only reason I know that is because I drive by an airport every morning at 3 a.m. And that's the only reason I knew that answer. Aren't you proud of me, Steve?
You're
Anyway,
ready.
all right. But so I'm going to keep this government test close by because I feel like there's, you know what, I'm not going to say anymore. I just don't know where this came from. It might be my neighbor. Let me just keep the rest of my thoughts to myself. Okay, so the hiring, obviously. Let me ask you this. Let's just a hypothetical here. Let's just say you were, I'm not talking about you, but an individual was tapped to be the number 2 at the FBI, right? The assistant director, right?
Surely the deputy director.
Deputy director. That's the phrase. You know what? Somewhere else around here is a list from Steve Friend that I keep handy of all of the names, because there's like an ADIC. I know there's an ADIC. All right, there's an ADIC, and there's some other.
The ADIC is directly over the SAC.
Right? Yeah, I cannot believe that the world's biggest Beavis and Butthead fan doesn't have that list of job titles. You know, somebody was playing games. Just real quick, just remind us of some of the more creative job titles at the FBI before I continue.
Well, if you're in the field versus at headquarters, if you're in the field, there's the regular agent who directs, who reports to a supervisory special agent.
Got it.
Who reports to an ASAC.
Yeah, here we go.
Be the assistant special agent in charge.
Yep.
Reports to the SAC or the SAC.
The SAC,
in some big offices, there's an ADIC, assistant director in charge.
That's right, an ADIC.
And then you go over to headquarters, which is a different chain of command, where the program manager, they report to the assistant unit chief, who reports to the unit chief. Then you have an assistant section chief, and then a section chief, and then an assistant director, then a associate deputy director, and then because they did away with the executive assistant directors, those are now a different title entirely because they just rearranged the deck chairs. So I don't know what that is. And then because above that is the associate deputy director who reports to the deputy director, but because Dan Bongino did a terrible job of that, they had to bring in a co-deputy director. So now there's 2 number 2s and 1 number 3, and they report to the director of the FBI. And you should know that on top of Andrew Bailey being one of the co-deputy directors, they now have Chris Rea, who they brought in, and he was the ASAC in Houston when the FBI was surveilling a wife of a federal air marshal, and for 2 years, even though she was paralyzed on one side of her body and was identified as being a January 6th, waving that side of her body. They're all compromised.
Nothing but the best investigations for our tax dollars. I just want to point out here, I did find that list here, and there it is. Don't forget, it's an ADIC, assistant director in charge, and then there's the SAC right there, the special agent in charge. But okay, you mentioned a name there. You mentioned a name while you were going through that. I was talking about a hypothetical. Again, let's go back to the headquarters. That was the local office. Let's go. So let's just say that somebody, anybody, just anyone, rando out there wants to be deputy director. Certainly there's a background check on someone being considered for that position, from what I understand, right?
There should be, but I know that Dan Bongino got a dispensation when it came to the lie detector, the polygraph.
What's that?
As did Marshall Yates.
Well, I'll be
yeah. So there, you have to do a polygraph as part of your background check, but Kash Patel saw fit to give Dan Bongino a pass on that.
Why would that be, you think?
I mean, he must have registered deception on one of the various topics, ranging from drug abuse to marital infidelity to contact with foreign agents. Something in there, he was not able to pass the test.
Well, damn. Kash Patel, what's this thing about the FBI? He announced that they arrested 490% more. What are these folks again?
Nihilistic violent extremist.
So what's a nihilistic violent extremist? And what's this stat about?
You want to have some fun with me today, Keith? This is going to be great. Ready?
Yeah.
So national security in the FBI, they're responsible for going after those dastardly terrorists. There's just not enough of them, so they keep inventing new terrorists. So you go from looking for legitimate terrorists in the early 2000s to homegrown violent extremists, which are Americans or first-generation Americans who are inspired by a foreign ideology. Then they ran out of those guys, so they came up with domestic violent extremists, which are homegrown ideologies, ergo people who are militia violent extremists, sovereign citizen types, moms who go to school board meetings because they don't like the masking that's going on, people who go to radical traditional Catholics, people who go to Latin Mass, you know.
Yep.
And then they came up with another one, and that was the anti-government, anti-authority violent extremist, agave. That was MAGA. Those were people who had a perception of government overreach or negligence.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I do it so well, and it's been a few minutes since I have. Who is there? Someone specific? Okay, let me back up. I don't know if you ever watched Mad Men, right? I was a big fan of that show, but they would get in a room, and John Hamm would make his presentation, and they would come up with an ad campaign, right? Who is there? One specific person at the FBI? Is it just a couple of guys holding their junk at the stall? Like what? Who is it that stands around, sits around, and comes up with? Well, not only comes up with stuff like and thank you for paying attention. Yes, you're right, Born Genius. Acid. I'm sorry, acid. A dick over the sack. Yep, that's right. So, but who comes up with a lot of this these terms like you just threw out there? Is there one specific a department that is brainstorming, hey, let's come up with this description for this person? Like, in other words, is it just a team effort, or what's happening inside the walls there? And then I'll shut up for at least another minute.
It's everybody's opportunity, because if you come up with a really great acronym, then you can promote off of it. So the Radical Traditional Catholic, RTC, was an invention of an intelligence analyst in Richmond, Virginia, who was just like an angry former Catholic, basically, who self-deployed to parishes himself, like he was Jason Bourne or something. Oh, and just so you know, if that intel analyst wants to become an agent, he doesn't have to do a phase 2 now.
I did not know that my question was going to lead to that answer. Holy crap. Okay. Wow. So are you emailing your supervisor to make sure it's on record? Like, hey, what if we call blah, blah, blah? What if we use this term and then it gets in the pipeline that way? Is that how that works?
It's I mean, those are a lot of times creation from the Intel shop where they're just writing term papers on things that they want to. They're responsible for writing a couple of term papers a year. That's their job. And they can just kind of shop around for anything they want, which is why they'll imbibe things like from far left sources like the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Atlantic, and that'll be the inspiration to write their bulletin or their intel product that is then imbibed by the FBI and then sort of laundered into its operations, because they're like, oh, well, our intelligence people are reporting X, Y, and Z, so we need to go after X, Y, and Z, and the X, Y, and Z just happens to be moms at school board meetings. Okay. So it looks legitimate. Now, we go beyond the agave, anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremist. That's been shelved for the time being until we get President Newsom, American Psycho.
Oh,
try to unsee that. He looks
as bad as it is. You had to do that to me.
Yeah.
And also, what was the Catholic phrase again? The
Radical Traditional Catholic, RTC. Okay.
I'm not being facetious when I ask.
So now we have the nihilistic violent extremist.
Are you getting bonuses for this? Like monetary bonuses? Holy crap.
Promotions, bonuses.
Do you get a bonus for SAC if you came up with that?
Whoever came up with that deserves a high five.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry. Now I'm going to turn my mic off. I promise. Go ahead.
I mean, there's a bunch of 8th graders in the origin story of the FBI that were just like high fiving.
Yeah.
So nihilistic violent extremists, this is the one that Kash Patel is continually banging the drum on. So to be a terrorist, to engage in terrorism, you have to do something that is unlawful, that causes harm to people, physical harm, and it's in furtherance of a political ideology, a spiritual ideology, some sort of ideology, because terror, you're instilling terror in people to get to your radical ends, right? That's essentially what terrorism is. The problem with nihilistic violent extremists is that nihilists don't have ideology. Did you not see Big Lebowski? So they're trying to come up with a nihilistic ideology. And the idea is they're people who break the law and they do violence but mostly the violence is not violence. They're just recruiting people to do violence online because they just want to watch the world burn, like the Joker from Dark Knight. So I've read through a recent affidavit that came out, and I want to get to the 490% in a minute because this is hysterical. But Keith, we've gone over it before, the FBI playbook for terrorism entrapments, right? Where they will find a vulnerable person and they'll groom them and then they'll spring the mousetrap. So in a recent affidavit for the latest and greatest bust out of California that the FBI was touting as a nihilistic violent extremist, they say that the NVEs will go after vulnerable people and encourage them to engage in bad activities that are destructive and record it if they can on video, which is exactly what the FBI does for all its terrorism cases. So I think the FBI could qualify as a nihilistic violent extremist organization at this point. But what they're hanging their hat on is this 764 organization that, from what I can tell, is a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds online who are pedophiles or pederasts, or they're just jerks who will go into mental health forums and try to get people to go cut themselves, right? That's not terrorism, though. And now that they're 18, we're going to go charge them for what they did if they're possessing child pornography or trying to manufacture child pornography, or they're trying to get people to go and do some self-harm. Those are violations of criminal law, but we're going to call them terrorists so that we can say we're stopping terrorists. So then we get to 490%. I mean, that's like a really specific number because Kash Patel sucks at PR. He could say almost 500%, so it would be incapable of calculating. But he wanted to be very specific and say 490%, which means that the FBI went from 100 to 590 terrorism arrests of that specific class? No. They went from 10 to 59. 59 people who were arrested, because that's an increase of 49 over 10, which is 490%, which were guys who were 15, 16, and 17, and then in 2025 turned 18. So they went forward and arrested them. And it's increasingly for possessing child pornography. Nobody's going to cry tears for pedophiles. We want them to go feet first into the wood chipper. The problem is we're now jamming the square peg into the round hole and calling it terrorism. And then when you get American Psycho Gavin Newsom as a president, he will not only reactivate the agave term, they'll just pivot the nihilistic violent extremist to something different and call it terrorism and use national security resources in order to do it.
He is the front runner for the Democrats right now.
Well, he's out there telling black audiences that he's just like them and can't read. So he's feeling pretty confident.
Yes. Okay. You mentioned something there, and it reminds me that every time I have you on, I want this fact repeated. You alluded to it there, and correct me as soon as I say the wrong number. 90% of domestic violence, domestic terror.
It's in excess of 90% of
more than
FBI.
90% of domestic terrorist cases originate with the FBI, right? Like
yes.
They set somebody up for it.
Project Salam did a study on this back in 2014. In excess of 90% of FBI terrorism arrests involve somebody who is neither predisposed or capable of actually carrying out a terrorist attack. I mean, they might be a bad dude who has bad ideas, but they're just not capable of doing it. And having bad ideas isn't illegal. And what we're seeing now increasingly is that it's juveniles because of the online ability. 2014 to today, I mean, the online ability is vastly superior to that. So they're able to groom 15, 16, 17-year-olds, wait till they turn 18, and then go ahead and arrest them.
Cool. I swear. Your government, your tax dollars at work. So now this seems like it's good news, right? Kash Patel says that the FBI has recovered 6,000 children in 2025 alone. That's good, right? That's good news, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, let's just think through the number for a second, Keith, right?
6,000.
So 6,000 children.
Am I doing math here? Do I need a calculator or something?
So that would be 500 children a month. right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
They don't work weekends.
Okay.
So that would be over 20 children a day who are being reunited with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Kash Patel might have put out a tweet about that? Like one photo op? One. But we don't get that because recovering a child is not what you think because you speak English. You don't speak FBI. What recovering a child means is that NCMEC, National Child for Missing and Exploited Children, which is like a quasi-private public entity. They're people who work all day long and view child pornography in the hope that they will find the bad guys and refer them over to law enforcement, and also figure out who the kids are in the videos, right? And what will go on there is that there will be a video of a particular child that is passed around all the time. It's the same video over and over and over again. They can authenticate, okay, we know this video, it's confirmed, this is child pornography. You can put NCMEC seal of approval on it. You don't even need to view it, officer. This is child pornography. And there'll be a video series because they will recognize the background, they'll recognize the child, and they'll say like, oh, it's that same kid over and over and over again in these series of say 10 different videos. And we don't know who this kid is. And we'll name the kid. We'll say that that's little Julie. We'll just call her little Julie. And we're trying to figure out who little Julie is. And then one day they figure out that little Julie is actually named Jane Doe. And Jane lives in East Kansas. She's 32 years old. And we've been able to identify her. And she says, yeah, that was me. My stepdad did that to me when I was 3 years old. And by law, Jane has to be contacted every single time someone gets arrested for possessing child pornography of her by law, unless she opts out and says, hey, look, that video is circulating around the internet. Like thousands and thousands of pedophiles have access to it. I don't need to be contacted every single time in the future. You have the child pornography. You can charge them with it. I don't need to find out about it. I just want to move on. NCMEC has identified little Julie as Jane Doe. The FBI says that they've recovered that child. That's what that means.
Cool.
They don't do that at all. I mean, I had a unicorn of a case. I mean, we can't get Nancy Guthrie, right? We can't find a kidnapping victim ever because they always get killed, right? Or a lot of them are parental kidnappings or virtual kidnappings that aren't really kidnappings. I had a legitimate runaway kid who was, you could construe it as kidnapping, and I found her alive. Okay, that never happens. I mean, ever. It's one of the reasons that I can look back and be like, maybe that's why it was a good thing I was in the FBI. Like the one shining example. Wow. That doesn't happen. 6,500 a month, 20 a day, and the most social media obsessed presidential administration in history, FBI director in history, doesn't tweet it out because it's garbage.
Boy, that's heartbreaking. I mean, this is the kind of story that leads newscasts.
Mm-hmm. And he knows it. He knows it.
Yeah.
But just hey, I'm a numbers guy. Like, think through that number. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
They at the State of the Union, they didn't roll out one kid who got returned to mom and dad.
That's the same, in the same vein as the conversation that we had, which is a fascinating episode. If you want to go and find the Adam Walsh case that we did, and I won't spend the time here getting into it, but one of the things that stood out from that conversation was the complete fabrication of how many children were kidnapped in America. And when you stop, just like you did there, and you micro it down from how many kids per year, okay, well, that was as many a month, a week, a day. Holy crap, there should be kids disappearing on my street every hour. Because nobody, you just go right for the emotion, and then nobody stops to think. They go, no, we got to do something. We got to pass a law. We got to get more bodies. We got to, more badges, and we got to get this stuff fixed.
So this is a little bit off topic from what we're covering, but did you ever see the movie Wind River?
I don't get out much, no.
So it's one of the main movies that people always ask me if I've ever seen, because I worked on Indian reservations, and it covers a woman who's murdered on the Wind River Indian reservation. The FBI is investigating, and it's completely fictionalized. It's very entertaining, but it's nothing close to reality. But at the end of that movie, they throw out this giant number, which I can't recall the top of my head. It's like the missing and murdered women on an Indian reservations figure, and it's like this astronomical number. Okay. This is an entity that gets government funding, and they're trying to advocate on behalf of missing and murdered Native American women on Indian reservations. I worked on reservations, and I remember being contacted and being told, hey, there's these 2 women that are reported missing on your reservation. I'm like, I know just about everybody on the reservation. I don't know these 2 women. So I went and talked to the police chief, who knew more than I did. He'd been there forever. And he said, oh, yeah. She lives in town in Sioux City, Iowa. She moved off the reservation, and she moved here. She got married, and they just moved, and they left the reservation. I was like, oh, so they're okay? Like, yeah. So I called up and I said, like, hey, I located your women, right? And they're like, well, if they leave the reservation, we have to put them down as missing still. We don't want to lose the numbers.
So I guess it's true with absolutely everything, especially in government, but really this is kind of a universal truth. Follow the money. Follow the money. I mean, that's the bottom line of everything. If there's money at the end of the line, then that's the answer to all of these strange definitions. And it's just, I don't know, man. Just, I'm angry. Okay, so what else have you been talking about over at the American Radicals podcast that maybe we haven't talked about yet, or is there something here that we need to visit? Because I'm sufficiently enraged right now. Is there something else I need to be pissed about?
Well, I mean, so today wound up doing a breakdown of not just the director's trip to Italy and the problems with that, but what I love to do, which is looking at the FBI press releases that come out all the time.
This is some of your best stuff, man. Explain what you do on FBI press release day.
So I aggregate them. It's all publicly available. The FBI has a different social media Twitter account for each one of its 56 field offices, and they will put out their helmet sticker trophies, and saying like, hey, we did an awesome job. And I've gotten pretty proficient at this point where I can kind of smell a rat. And I know what they do and don't typically work. I mean, which is why when, Kash Patel says, oh, murder rates are down in Raleigh, North Carolina. Well, the FBI doesn't investigate murder. So why are you bragging about that? Or crime rates are down around the country. It was, 30% of large police departments are not reporting their crime to the FBI. So maybe that's contributing to the lower numbers. But they will put out these press releases or a post on X, and I will drill down to the DOJ press release. And typically it's around paragraph 3 or 4 where it says, according to the court documents, you find out that the armed bank robbery that was interdicted by the FBI wound up being a patrol officer who happened upon the bank when the guy was walking out and arrested him immediately. And the FBI just waited to get all the paperwork and then took it to federal court. And then 3, 4, 5 years later, they are now touting how they had this bank robber sentence. Meanwhile, it's been on their books, on their quotas for 5 fiscal years. They've been able to boost their numbers, and now they've stolen credit for the great police work that we've done. And the point always is, we don't need an FBI. We have a extremely robust, very proficient law enforcement apparatus in this country at state and local levels. And we are very, very far away from the days of Bonnie and Clyde, when you could do a robbery, run across state lines, and ollie ollie oxen free. And we do not need the FBI. And in fact, it's not even not needing them. They're actually a net negative. They're not as good at investigating. I mean, need no further example than the Nancy Guthrie case, where they're out there and the FBI agents who are there don't work kidnappings. They don't work murders. So what are you bringing to the table other than a pocketbook of saying like, well, we'll offer a reward? Well, we don't need an $11 billion agency to offer a reward. We don't need an agency flying a guy around private around the world in order to do that. You just want a pool of money for reward money. Okay, you can just put like one accountant in charge of it.
that is the word redundancy isn't even applicable here. It's just dishonesty.
Yeah.
And I just fascinating to hear how local police work turns into a federal case. What? Because a federally insured bank was involved?
Yeah, the nexus. Many of the times, the 924 illegal guns is a big way they get involved, because if you commit a crime while having a gun, that makes it a federal crime.
Right.
So they'll jump in on that. So, you killed somebody. Well, we'll get you on the gun crime. Or after the fact, they'll get people sometimes who are in prison already. I mean, I had this, and this one really offended my sensibilities quite a bit, because it was in my backyard. And it was a human trafficking case in Daytona Beach, Florida. And it was around the time that the alleged offense happened, would have been when I was investigating those crimes in my area. And it never crossed my radar. So I didn't understand what had happened. And then I researched it and found out that the guy was already in prison for manslaughter. And some women came forward and said, hey, look, he was our pimp and he was doing this abusive stuff to us when we were prostitutes. So then after the fact, while he was in prison, the FBI indicted him, got a conviction because he pled guilty, and his entire sentence would be served concurrently with his manslaughter charge. So he wouldn't do an extra day in prison at all. So what was the point? I mean, I want justice for those victims for sure. But if we're going to talk about a finite amount of resources and time, and you're not even able to get him an extra day in prison after all that, and then you have the gall, the unmitigated hubris to go out and brag how you've gotten a human trafficker sentenced to prison, that's a joke. The American people deserve better than that.
Yeah. Man, okay, so check this out. In the past, I've given you the hypothetical question that if you were the FBI director and a sane country would make you the FBI director, but we're definitely not that. That ship has sailed long ago, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not coming back into port. But you stated at one time that if you were in charge of the FBI, that you would disarm it. That it's an investigative body. It's not a law enforcement apparatus. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you basically said there's no reason to be armed, right? Is that accurate so far?
If you're going to keep the agency, I think the best thing you could do would actually take the guns away from it.
Okay.
That would empower local law enforcement, because they could conduct investigations, and then to actually go forward with an arrest, they wouldn't be sworn law enforcement officers. Okay. They would need to get cooperation from either a federal marshal or, more likely, a deputized local law enforcement official, a sheriff's deputy, police officer, who is accountable to the local populace. And the sheriff there would basically have a final say and say, like, hey, I appreciate how you investigated my constituent for being a radical traditional Catholic, but we're not going to effect that arrest.
Uh-huh.
And then the FBI wouldn't do those sorts of things. They would actually focus on what the sheriff needed focusing on, and they would devote the resources to those things so that they could be effective at it. And because the sheriff is answerable to the people, he's incentivized to actually bring crime down. So that would be a good use of resources, whereas the FBI is so removed, and they're perversely incentivized to bring crime up, which is why they keep inventing new variations of terrorism so they can artificially increase the numbers and say, look how awesome we did. We need more funding.
It just feeds on itself. Like every government, like every three-letter agency, right? Okay, so the way I look at the FBI now is much the way John F. Kennedy looked at the CIA. And in fact, let me clarify. I look at the FBI and the CIA the way JFK used to look at the CIA. You know, break it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. I had hope that it could be reformed. I readily admit that I thought Kash Patel was the guy for that job. That would have been a terrible hire by me if I were in the same position as President Trump. And so I would have made the same error. At this point, Are you of that mindset? Can the FBI be reformed, or is it time for the Spirit Halloween sign to be put out front of the Hoover Building, Steve Friend?
Oh, it's long past time for the Spirit Halloween sign. I mean, it was probably needed to go there, and that was my preference even before Kash Patel was elevated. But I recognize
you've seen it from the inside, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so I mean, you're saying that as someone who is a part of that beast. That's fascinating.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and look, the people who are competent investigators and want to stay in law enforcement, they're going to land on their feet. They're going to do just fine. I'm not really worried about that. There's just not a need for it from a practical purpose. And then now it's a political entity in and of itself entirely, where it used to be the politics of the FBI were what is good for the FBI. Well, whatever is good for the FBI is whatever the people in charge of the executive branch want, because you're answerable to them. So you kind of preserve the status quo. If they say go ahead and get the Vietnam draft dodgers, well, let's just go get those guys. If they want us to go after the communists, we'll go after to get the communists. And I think at the time, I mean, you could argue about whether or not it was right or wrong, but for the most part, that was sort of perceived to be objectively good to go after communists. But now our country has moved so far to the left, that's no longer happening. And they're just in search of whatever they have to please their overlord. So they have PatCon in the 90s, and they have Waco and Ruby Ridge type of hits. And then in the 2000s, when the neocons got back in charge, then they started going after Muslim Americans who were homegrown violent extremists. Meanwhile, the biggest Al-Qaeda arrest in the history of the FBI is the Liberty City 7 out of Miami. None of those guys was actually affiliated with Al-Qaeda. They just generated it out of whole cloth. And then, flash forward into the Biden administration, they're going after MAGA, and they're calling them agaves. Now you've got the nihilistic violent extremists, which are under the Trump administration. And that is sort of pulling the wool over the eyes of people, because nobody's going to cry about calling a pedophile a terrorist. But the tool is still there. The ring of power is still there. There is no solution to it. It cannot be wielded. If you read Tolkien, the only solution is to throw the ring into the volcano. And they have not come to that ultimate conclusion. And they're going to pay the price for it, because when we get President American Psycho, the gun's going to be turned back around on them.
Cool. No, that's good. Okay, let me. I had one more question for you here. It slips my mind now, actually. Shoot, what was I gonna ask you? Well, I will say that it's disheartening. I know what it was. Since we've got the FBI director flying to the Olympics and whatnot, and having all this free time, surely that means that they've cracked every case that they've got sitting on the books, such as Butler, Pennsylvania. Are we ever going to learn any more about Thomas Matthew Crooks, sir?
No, I doubt that, because they've said that they've briefed the president on that, and that's sufficient. But
who hired the private investigator? who was behind that? Because I assumed the whole time it was Trump.
I'm not sure about that. I've just always been on the theory, which I become every day increasingly more and more convinced, that Thomas Matthew Crooks was in the process of being entrapped by the FBI to go do some sort of a terrorism plot. I think that the evidence is just mounting on that, and the way that they reacted in the aftermath of it just shows how they wanted to cover it up. I mean, look, Crooks was tailor-made.
Hold on. You think that the FBI was working with Crooks for a terrorism plot, or are you saying you think the FBI was working with Crooks to assassinate Donald Trump?
No, I don't think that they were looking at that. And track with me on this. He looks like the socially awkward loner type that they love to entrap, right? Vulnerable guy. He has no friends in the world. You introduce a confidential human source, a snitch, and then he befriends him, and then starts to convince him to do his worst ideas, introduce an undercover, and then you arrest him, right? I think that he fits that bill quite nicely. Now, again, back to the hubris. FBI doesn't work weekends. And Thomas Matthew Crooks was smarter than most of the people that they typically go after. I mean, he had some junior college. He seemed to be with it a little bit more than others. When did Butler happen? On a Saturday. When nobody was working. I think he just was being led down a trail of breadcrumbs being laid for him, and then just kind of lost patience with it and said, I'm just gonna go grab my dad's rifle and go take a shot. And then there was a myth of competence that exists with Secret Service, which we saw yet another example of when the person got into Mar-a-Lago recently, and was able to get a successful assassination attempt. It was successful. He got a headshot, multiple shots off. Failures of communications went there. That was all on display. He winds up being killed. Now the FBI has to scramble. Holy crap. We have a domestic terrorism case with crooks as our subject, and we might have radicalized him to take a shot at the president. What are we going to do? Well, firstly, we will clean up the scene right away. We will seize his device and then immediately return it to his family 24 hours later. Then we'll have the deputy director of the FBI go and testify to the Senate at a hearing where he says that we're investigating crooks as potentially domestic terrorism. And when Ron Johnson says, why? That doesn't make sense. Well, sir, during the Capitol baseball shooting, we said that when that Bernie Sanders supporter showed up and asked where the Republicans were, and then he tried to kill all the Republicans, we at the time said it wasn't assassination. It was actually suicide by cop. That was in the bad old days of the FBI in 2017 during the first year of the Trump administration. So we've learned our lessons, sir. So we're going to look at this potentially as terrorism to take the blinders off, sir. Meanwhile, you already had a case open. And on top of that, now it's classified. Can't talk about it. Can't reveal that. Ongoing investigation. Sources and methods, sir. Can't talk about it. Oh, and then we'll throw out the last little bit where we say that, Iran might have been involved. Terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. Meanwhile, they lean on Asif Merchant, who was arrested the day before, conveniently, the Crook's assassination attempt. It wasn't connected, but he was the guy who was from Pakistan, who was apparently coming to America on behalf of Iran, endorsed by the FBI Dallas office, allowed to travel to the United States, then go into New York City, where he was planning to hire hitmen to carry out assassination attempts, and also hire dozens of fake protesters to situate themselves outside random politicians' houses, and then have some unknown female infiltrate like she was in Mission Impossible, and steal classified material off their desks because I guess they're all Joe Biden. And then he was getting this all done for $5,000, which he didn't have access to, because he's a crazy person. And the FBI wanted to just get a simple, easy terrorism arrest out of it. But then they say, oh, Iran, ooh, terrorism. It's conveniently around the same time as the assassination attempt. Let's get this all giant stew in there, and then we will just throw it up against the wall, and people will believe it. I think that there's a pretty compelling case there that Crooks was in the process of being entrapped, and that they've now scrambled it, and they do not want it to come out that the FBI was doing that, because they'll take the blame for maybe you radicalized a possible assassin. Plus, the entire playbook that they typically use would be on the chopping block, and that's what we just said. 90% of their terrorism cases. They don't want to lose that tool.
So what do you think they told the president to satisfy him about this assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania?
I think that they just said the same thing that they did for the guy down in outside the golf course. It's a one-off, and there were security failures because Biden was in charge, and we have now got the right people at the helm. We got Cash. We got the guy who was on that protective detail for you in charge of the Secret Service. His name escapes me now. Everything is great. And President's got a full agenda, and he presumes that he makes the best hiring decisions, and everything's fine.
What do you make of the return to the world of podcasting by the former deputy director Dan Bongino and his message for people who dare to doubt anything that he says?
Well, he calls himself the Podfather now. Which,
yeah, that's right.
I think Adam Curry might have a bone to pick with that, because he actually is the Podfather. But
okay.
He is doing the bidding of the administration, because that's what his perceived skill set is. Like, I went back and I found it. You remember over the summer when they did the July dump on Axios and said the Epstein files were closed and nobody was going to be charged, and then he threatened to quit?
I remember where I was sitting when I read. Oh, yeah. And he kind of went dark for a little bit right after that. Yes,
And he knew his reputation was mud. He was going to quit. And then they likely said to him, you can't quit. You got to take a bite of this bleep sandwich with us, but we'll find you an exit when enough time has happened. And then he went back, and now he's not talking about Epstein at all.
He's not talking about Epstein, but he can't do it all at one time. He did tell us. And
and all he's doing is interviewing people from the administration, he's Fox News, right?
And now he is one of those who provide nice cover. But I wonder now. Well, let me back up here. Let's go back to July, like you said. Hey, you're in it, man. You're one of us. I don't know how deep the conversations went. I have no idea. I'm not privy to them, but we can speculate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I can say that's factual is I have never seen someone be so defensive just when they crack that mic and just go in 0 to 60 on uber defensive mode. But I think you're right. I think they said at the time, you got to stick around here to the end of the year. And like you said, we're going to provide that exit. And now I want you to, and I'm just going to make an assumption here. Was that exit? We caught the J6 bomber and we're giving credit to you on your birthday?
Yes.
What happened there? And what is the latest with that? My gosh, that poor young man.
Yeah. So that was done so that he could have a nice press conference. That was going to be his parting gift. They were trying to find a way for him to exit. They were originally, I believe, going to say that Operation Summer Heat, where they got all those arrests over the summer. And they were saying, well, Dan Bongino architected this entire operation. Like, the FBI does it every single year. They just renamed it. Okay. And then they had the information come forward that there was a Capitol Police officer who fit the bill as the likely January 5th/6th pipe bomber. And they had to scramble, and they got their patsy. They got Brian Cole Jr., an autistic brony, My Little Pony fan. And they went with this guy who is autistic and apparently was angry about the election. So he built a pipe bomb that didn't work using pipe bomb parts that he bought before the election. And then after did that, threw everything out, but then went back and bought more so he could conveniently have it for us. And he never changed his habit of life or movement, used his own credit cards and car and cell phone, and yet eluded us for 5 years. Like, this is our guy.
Multiple trips, I'd like to point out, to the hardware store to build this bomb over the course of several years.
And his vehicle is driving at times when the pipe bomber is walking. So, yeah, not a strong case. No. And then Dan Bongino leaves. He went on terminal leave after that, right? He left in like late November, early December. And then he just used his leave time up and got credit for it because he wanted to get it into January so he could say he was there for a year. So because the calendar went from 2025 to 2026. Meanwhile,
pension, right?
He was only there for like 9 months. Like, I accrued more sick time.
Oh, no.
In my time at the FBI, more sick time and vacation time than Dan Bongino spent at the FBI. And now he's going to talk about, from a position of experience, how things are. So he leaves. He goes back to doing the podcasting, but he's doing it in a completely state-run media type of perspective, right? Yes. And the other thing I'll note is he just got back with Fox News, right? He got fired by Fox. And then he went and said Epstein killed himself and there's nothing to see here. We're going to move on. And then they brought him back.
Again, I say, cool. What's the Brian Cole Jr.? I don't know his next court date, but that man has to be. I cannot imagine mentally what he is going through.
Yeah, that's what they're hoping. That they're going to hope to suicide him. The judge is in on it too. It's that Boasberg judge. They're continuing to rule in the government's favor every single time. The narrative is more important to even a communist like Boasberg that this guy was a part of some sort of insurrection, that rather than which is far more likely, or I mean, I wouldn't even hedge that much. What is true is that a Capitol Police officer was a pipe bomb because it was a giant government op. And they do not want to lose that legitimacy, because if that comes out, there is no excuse for keeping multiple government agencies existing. If you knew nothing else about the FBI, you could totally Men in Black memory wipe everything we talked about today, everything we've ever talked about. And if I said, hey, the FBI was part of a plot to drop fake pipe bombs in the nation's capital so that there could be a terrorism angle on people protesting outside the Capitol building on January 6th, you would say that has to go. And it never made sense to me anyway. And maybe it's because I think differently than most people. Maybe because I have a law enforcement investigation background. This never made sense to me, except it does make sense. And that is, the pipe bombs were married to the Capitol. Why? There was never any evidence that connected them, right? The pipe bombs were not at the Capitol. They were dropped the night before. They were weapons of mass destruction, not connected to any of rioting or protesting or however you want to characterize the Capitol. And yet they were. In fact, the pipe bombs were used in court documents by the DOJ when they requested sentencing enhancements for January 6ers. They said, hey, look, there was a terrorism attack. There was a bomb there. We have to enhance this. This is terrorism. To me, the comparison would be like, well, there was a carjacking in Southeast DC. It's a crime of violence. Could you pin that on the January 6th people at the Capitol? It's similar. There's no evidentiary connection. And then we got an evidentiary connection. We got a Capitol Police officer who was there the night before and at the Capitol the next day taking headshots of people with pepper balls. Now we have an evidentiary connection, but it ain't good for the government. So they're going to get rid of that and try to do it separately. And that presents an interesting challenge with Brian Cole Jr. because his attorneys, if they're doing a good job, and I think some of them are trying and some of them I heard aren't, but they're going to zealously represent Brian Cole Jr. Just him. They don't care about a deep state plot. They don't care about a conspiracy theory. They just want to get that guy out of jail. That's their job. Respect, okay? So they're going to try to do things like say the pardon that was issued for January 6th should apply to Brian Cole Jr. And the government is going to be in the position of saying, it doesn't apply to him. It's like, well, then why did you use it in sentencing enhancements for other people? So it's going to be really weird to see the DOJ come back and say, no, it doesn't apply. We want to put him in jail, which is why I think ultimately we've already seen the DOJ drag its feet so that they missed a statute of limitations on some of the charges. And they're going to say, oh, dang it. It's that Biden FBI screwed us. We would have had it. Oh, it's that Bo Asberg. He would have had it. And Bo Asberg's probably going to say the pardon applies. And then they say, case closed. We got our man. And that communist judge who has a lifetime appointment did us in again. I guess we better ask those darn Republicans to go try to impeach him when they're in the minority.
Cool. That's today's word of the day is cool. This is, I mean, we're living in the damn matrix after all. Okay, I did look up and I found that the next status hearing, ironically enough, for Brian Cole Jr. is tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time.
Nice.
Wow. We'll be looking for that. But what is so ironic, or I don't know, telling, I should say, that the public, or at least the media, has made their mind up that, yep, that's the guy, is the fact that yours truly was over here searching when is the next court appearance for Brian Cole Jr. And the most recent articles written were over a month ago. I mean, these were back in December. These stories, there's been nothing written fresh in the last few weeks. Granted, there hasn't been a court appearance in the last few weeks, but you would think there would be some mild curiosity to a terrorist pipe bomber in the nation's capital. It's almost like any kind of genuine curiosity of facts around this case aren't worth pursuing because, well, it's almost like people have been taught a lesson to not ask questions of our government, regardless of who's in power. Steve Friend, I'm sorry. as always, just for what you have gone through as a patriot for this country, and your honorable service to this nation in the FBI. I'm sorry that you continue to go through a living nightmare. And I do hope that everyone will, if they're not already familiar, to go to Spotify, Apple, or wherever, and the American Radicals podcast. There's the YouTube channel at AmRadPod. AmRadPod. I don't know why I can't speak. I haven't even been drinking. And don't forget, I'm going to hold you to it. It's going to irritate you more so than normal. I'm looking forward to the next time I see a picture come up here of your studio. A little picture of your awesome podcast logo for the American Radicals podcast sitting on that little desk back there, sir. As always, thanks for making time. Steve Friend, also a book author. I almost have it memorized. It's True Blue, My Journey from Beat Cop to FBI Agent. Did I get that? Am I
to suspended FBI whistleblower?
Yeah, it's got to be updated. Right. Bless you, sir. Steve Friend, follow him on X at Real Steve Friend. Thanks to all of you for being a part of this conversation today. We'll be back about 22 hours from now. We'll do the Friday live stream. It looks like it's going to be Brad and Rebecca joining me for some of the fun here on atthemikeshow.com and on X and YouTube and wherever you are now. That's where you need to be. Don't forget the One Person Project. Share it with one person, please. I would be so grateful. Thanks so much, Real Steve Friend, American Radicals podcast. I appreciate it as always, sir.
You got it.